TechCrunch founder Michael Arrington is selling his apartment as a real estate backed NFT. So he bought the apartment in 2017 on a platform called Proppy. He used ETH to buy it, and there was a smart contract involved. He's using the same platform again now, Proppy, but he's auctioning the apartment with an NFT attached to it. So this was really interesting to me. And what was interesting to me, maybe someone on the panel can help me understand. But if you bought the property and there was a smart contract involved and ETH was used, why do we now need to attach an NFT to it? It feels like the smart contract element kind of solves that problem for me, and I probably just don't understand it. So I'm going to throw it right down to you, Adam, and please help.
I love this use case. Like the original thing that we used to call the concept that has now become NFTs is kind of this idea of deeds. The thing about a token that makes it different from just a smart contract is how transferable it is, right? With a token, it's something that you can literally send from me to Ben. Oh, no, Ben. And we can actually transfer ownership in that way, right? Whereas if it's just in a smart contract, well, then you could potentially arrange to have it transferred, but it's a lot more complex than just literally sending the token in an on-chain transaction, right? So that's kind of the real place that these things come into play. And I think it's a great use. Zach?
Yeah, so I talked to Mike Arrington today about this, and the interesting thing is when you think about how this could interact with DeFi in some form going forward, right? So DeFi is known for its lending platforms, right? And if you have these real world assets that are tokenized that you can plug into some of these DeFi platforms, all of a sudden there are these financialization options that are available to you, and I think that's what. In talking with Michael Arrington, I think that's what he's thinking about here, right? This isn't just some NFT thing. This isn't the latest bandwagon gimmick thing. I'm gonna pump my apartment because it has NFT attached to it. The idea here is that maybe as other platforms like MakerDAO and other systems are talking about the tokenization of real world assets and inputting these assets into some of these financial systems that make all these kind of like options for moving and finding ways to earn yield on these assets possible. Maybe that's what we're heading toward down the road. So this requires. How do you yield farm an apartment? That would be that. Well,
is a great question. It's a matter of if and when. All right,
that is a great question. You could fractionalize it. You could fractionalize shares of that NFT, right? So it becomes like a timeshare or something, right? Like Beeple NFTs become fractionalized and become B20 tokens. We heard from Metakovan today and how this was a financialization option that was made available to him. If that's something that you could do with a real world asset, whether it's a car, a house, you name it. There are all sorts of interesting things in this world of DeFi Lego blocks that, I don't know, might be cool down the road, but we'll see.
So has this the answer then? Naomi, ask your question.
All right, I'll go ahead. About the legalities around this. So I agree that deed titles are super interesting as a use case when it comes to NFTs and smart contracts. And we've been talking about land titles and things for years and years and years. And so it's really cool to finally see it happening. But you also have to have governments recognize the legality of it. You know, if this is taken to court and someone says, actually, I have a piece of paper that says I own this, you know, you have a token on a blockchain, you know, which one are you going to recognize? And so you do kind of need this consensus in society, and you need the courts to back that up. So I'm wondering whether Kiev has that consensus and what the courts have said about this way of transferring property titles. Does anyone have any insight into any progress being made there?
So I don't know anything specifically about Kiev, but I know that to this specific problem you're talking about, which is how do you connect the token to the actual real life enforceability of like a contract? One of the projects I've been tracking is Trade Hill Exchange founder Jared Kenna owns a building in San Francisco called 20 Mission, and he tokenized all of the rooms within it. It's a hacker hotel that he's rented out to people for a long time, and basically he created a token that represents a $1 per month lease on for 75 years. On one particular room. And what they did is they actually built in the token itself with the complete identifiable information into the lease agreement itself, making it so that it was tied to whoever possesses the token, making it effectively a bearer asset but one that's enforceable by contract law that's very conventional and very well established. So I don't know how things are happening in Kiev, but there really are solutions to these problems. And it's an exciting time for those areas.
Well, Naomi, I think this answers your question. So the property is owned by a US entity, and the new owner of the NFT becomes the owner of the entity and the property itself. And then the process is just repeated time over time when the NFT is sold.
And I think this is like super interesting in the sense of like, I'm so curious about the ways NFTs are expanding beyond art and entertainment, right? Like they extend to property. Like I reported today about somebody who's selling their full genomic sequence as an NFT and can like selectively license that out to like researchers or to like other sort of medical data companies for like a fee. And I've also reported previously too on like proof of presence amongst IoT, like, right? The Internet of Things. Like how do you prove that you were somewhere else and what kind of if then that those like instances of NFTs can trigger. And so to me, there's a ton of real world physically connected projects and sort of assets that can be connected to NFTs. And seeing how that use case starts to develop is something I'm going to keep beating on this show because I think it's so important for this market continuing, right? Like we can have, NBA Top Shots being sold for X amount of money. We can have, other ecosystems developing them for art and stuff like that. We can have real world assets that are triggered in a verifiable way. And that is something, that is always going to be more interesting to me in a lot of ways.